you guys come out of the gate with this great album, which you had essentially just made yourself. You made that album yourself while you were all working full-time jobs.
Yeah.
So it's not like you were signed and brought into this slick situation.
No, and in fact, we experimented with remixing some of the songs to see like, are we missing some kind of professionalism or something? But it just didn't sound as good. So yeah, it's really not, the version that came out is not particularly different than how it sounded when we were selling CDRs at our shows.
So you come out with that first record, and then it seemed to me like you were very interested in not having to be any slack, coming out with more material very quickly. And that was a pressure. Did that come from you? Did you feel this pressure, like, we've just got to keep this going?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was obsessed because I'd been working full-time. I was a public school teacher, 8th grade English in New York. And it felt like a big deal to go, tell the principal, I'm going to go on tour with the band. So let's say that's probably June that year. I taught a full year, and I'm like, I'm going on tour this summer, so I don't think I'm going to come back. So it felt a little bit high stakes to have this like brief moment of success. So it felt like, let's keep this going before I have to go back to being a teacher or something. So yeah, I put a lot of pressure on myself and the whole band to try to get our second album out quickly. I was obsessed with that.
You really didn't want to go back to teaching. How awful were those kids?
I have a lot of affection for the kids, but it was a very difficult job.
Yes.
And also I just felt like we had this rare opportunity.
Sure. Yes, so,
no
one can begrudge you wanting to be a
30 kids can.
Yeah.
Gee, he's a huge star.
There was definitely felt like we had to keep things going. And then also, the putting out your first album, in many ways, it was a big success. But then, of course, you're dealing with criticism and haters for the first time. So then there's also that part of you that felt like you wanted to continue to show more dimensions of the band as quickly as possible.
Yes. Yeah.
Because our first album, it's very, it was the perfect first album for us, but, it was also so kind of youthful and collegiate and kind of like cheery, and it always felt like such a great starting point. But yeah, I was anxious to show like different shades of the band.
Yeah, and people, music critics especially, and everybody loves to say it's the sophomore slump, and Lorne Michaels told me many times that they did the first year of Saturday Night Live, which is October 75 to summer of 76, June or whatever, and then they break for the summer. And he said every season after that, like the second season, all he heard was not as good as the first.
Yeah.
Like, the one with the Muppets? No. What do you mean? Steve Martin doing King Tut's like the third or fourth,
Right.
But that's all he heard. And then of course, it was not as good as, 1975 to 1980.
Right.
Then it was not as good as and it was just, it's something that follows you, which is what I prefer is you've never been good.
Right.
And you never will be.
And you never will be. And I'm like, Dad, we've had this conversation. So there's this pressure to come out. You do 3 albums, I think, in a relatively short time.
Yeah, within 5 years.
Within 5 years, which is, by today's standards, that's moving. That's moving quickly.
Not as fast as the Beatles, but when I look, which in some ways is what something people always say, we're like, well, they made... it was 6 months between the White Album and, whatever. But yeah, it felt fast. And also for me, I kind of remember like I turned 30 when we were finishing up the tour for the third album. Mm-hmm. And, there were so many reasons why I think a band's first 3 albums tend to have like, there's just something really special about the first 3. You can look through so many bands where that represents a unit, a trilogy, whatever. Our first record deal was a 3-album deal. So there was so many ways in which after that intense 5 plus a couple year period of touring, it felt like, okay, turning 30, that was like a speed run through my 20s. The band is now in a different place, and time for a break.
And then 6.5 years?
Yeah.
What did you do during that time?
I did also,
account for your time, young man.
I mean,
I want to see receipts.
Yeah.
Guilty.
I did
I'm his accountant
I did
now.
all sorts of stuff. I mean, working on music, trying a few different things. It's a little hard to remember, but I remember thinking that the 6 years felt like nothing, and I still kind of feel that way. And in some ways, when I look back, I feel like we did it right, which is like, yeah, in your 20s, do it as quickly, like push yourself to go as quickly as possible. But that pace into your 30s, let alone your 40s, is insane.
Yeah.
I can't relate to it. I don't want it,
I am so aware that so much of stuff that I've done is because I had to, just because I was part of a machine where you need to do another one, and then you have to do this, and then you have to do that. And that there was if I did shows when I felt like I might have done like 5 shows.
Oh.
I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
something that and I don't know if you've had that. I'm sure you've had that creatively, where it's just sometimes creativity can happen in so many strange ways, but sometimes the good thing comes really easily, or sometimes it comes when, God damn it, we need another song.
No, totally. And I struggle with it a bit, just because I used to, when the ideas wouldn't come or something, I used to feel more anxious, like it's important, we got to get this album going. And then I learned a little more how to calm down and how to chill more. And then it stopped mattering to me that much how quickly things came, which is very like positive for my life, but not positive for the output. So I'm a little bit now like, it comes when it comes. We'll see. I've never regretted the amount of time between albums. Like looking back now, so now, we started this in our early 20s. This year I turned 40. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of a milestone looking backwards. And I think, all right, we have 5 albums out. If I'd been like a little more of a nut and probably gone harder and pushed harder, well, maybe we'd have 7 albums out, 8. It just, what difference does it make? You know?
You've got an amazing body of work. You've got a great body of work, and you can keep adding to it. But you're right. I think, first of all, I think I'm getting better at chilling.
Yeah, you are.
I think I am, definitely. But I had a major problem with it for a long time.
Well, you had a crazy job for how?
Way too long. Years and years and years of craziness. And I think there's no way. I think kids just changes you. It changes you so much, and then there's a while where you think, wait a minute, is there be creative versus be happy? And then it turns out, well, no, that's ridiculous. There's a way to do both. It can just come in so many different forms.
Right.
But when I'm not creative or I do work I don't like, now I can blame my children.
That's why you had them. Right?
You robbed me of what could have been genius. You should do that. You should just yell sometimes. Yeah. Just yell. You've robbed me of a great song.
There's also something funny about songs too. Like, I'm not trying to be too negative, but I've always looked at other, I think there's comedians who've done like great work late into their life, and directors and novelists and stuff. The number of people who recorded their best albums in their 40s or 50s or 60s, the consensus would be there's not a lot of people who have done that. So there's also some part of me that feels like, well, if you only get a certain number of songs in this life, like really wait for them, spread them out, and don't rush through it.
Right.